So, friends, today we will see the next part of our last class on graphical and diagrammatic representation of data. So, first of all, I would like to just recollect the things that I had told you in the last class. So, in last class, you had seen how to prepare line diagram and bar chart, and you also studied how these charts and graphs, diagram, etc. are helpful in presentation of our data. Now the next chart or diagram is the pie chart or circle graph. So this is very extensively used a visual representation device. It is used in many of the fields like industry or share market or sports or in our veterinary field also. So what this pie charts is actually, it will shape like a circle. So actually this pie chart is a circle, and it is used when we have to display proportion of data. So when we have to display the proportion of data as a part of whole, then most likely we will go for pie chart. So what is this proportion of data? That we will see an example, and then you will be able to understand it. The pie represents the whole. So actually I have already earlier told that it represents the proportion of data. So the whole is represented by a pie, and out of this proportion that we have to present in the pie diagram. The segment of the pie represents the proportion of the whole. So the pie is actually, you might be knowing, or you already know, the pie is equal to 360 degrees. 360 degrees. So a pie actually represents a circle, and the proportion of this whole circle is the segment of pie. So what is the definition of pie? The pie, it is actually a circle divided into portions that represent the relative frequency. That represents the relative frequencies or percentage of a population or a sample belonging to different categories. So it is a circle that is divided into different portions, and each portion will represent the relative frequency or percentage of a population or sample. So unlike bar and line graph, the pie charts do not show changes over time. So this is also very important point. In line gram and bar diagram, we have already seen that it represents how my data is changing with time. But here the main aim is to represent the proportion of whole. Then we will go for pie chart. Then another point is that the pie chart is a two-dimensional chart. Why it is two-dimensional chart? That you have to think, and I will tell you later also. So pie diagram is actually a two-dimensional diagram, whereas bar chart and line graph, these were the one-dimensional diagram. So it is best to use when comparing part of a whole. So I have already told you that whenever you have to display the proportion or part of a whole, then you have to go for pie chart. A pie piece representing a given category is portion of that circle is called as sector. So suppose this is the pie diagram. So this particular portion is representing a category. This particular portion actually it is representing a category, and this is called as the sector. This is called as a sector. Then the angle of a sector is proportional to the frequency of the data. So this is also very important. This angle of the sector, just remember this. This is the pi and this is the sector. So the angle of this sector is proportional to the frequency of data. So angle of that particular sector is representing the frequency of data. And we know that circle has 360 degree angle. We need to multiply percentage of a category by 360 to get angle of that particular sector. So how we will convert our data into that circle? That means ki we have to divide whole of our data into 360 degree angle. So how it will be divided? So it will be divided based on this formula. The angle of a sector is equal to frequency of that particular class divided by total frequency and multiplied by 360 degree. So what value will come? That will be the angle of sector. Then another method, if your data is in percentage, so the angle of a component will be percentage value of that component into 3.6. So this formula is also derived from, actually this is derived from this formula only. So this is how we can convert our actual data into the different angles. Then this is the example of pie chart. So here you can see the expenses are being presented in the form of percentage. The expenses on different items is being presented in the terms of percentage. So this percentage you can convert into the angle. So how you can convert into the angle? So it is, you can just remember the formula, that angle of component is equal to percentage value of that component into 3.6. So what here we will do, percentage value of that component is 15 into 3.6, that is 54. So for first item the angle will be 54 degree. So what we will do, we will take a protractor and we will draw an angle of 54 degree, and that will be the proportion relative to that item food. So this is how the pie chart can be prepared. So let us see one example from our veterinary field. So this is the pie chart representing the species-wise livestock population in India during the year 2012. So here you can see the data is again presented in the form of proportion. So percentage. So what we will do, 37.28 into 3.6. So whatever value will come, that will give the angle of that particular sector. So likewise you have to get the angle of all these items, and then we will prepare it in the form of a circle. So this is how a pie chart or pie diagram can be prepared. So why it is two dimensional? Because this is going into x and y direction both. So that is why the pie chart is a two dimensional graph or diagram, whereas if you see the bar chart actually only y axis is representing the frequency. Only y axis is representing the frequency, and this x axis, it is only representing the category, and there is no numerical value attached to this. There is no numerical value attached to this. That is why this is the bar diagram is called as one dimensional diagram, whereas pie chart is known as two dimensional diagram. Now what are the limitations of pie chart? So when you are having too many categories, suppose that in pie chart the limitation is that within a circle you have to represent all the categories. So suppose you are having thousands of category, or 30 category, 50 category, 20 category. So it will be very difficult to see the different categories clearly. So very close, thin area will be representing one category. So it will be very difficult to find any meaningful conclusion with such pie diagram. So in that case, pie diagram may be avoided. Then second is, we want to compare different categories that are close in size. Suppose you want to see the number of cow and buffalo in your herd, or cow, buffalo, sheep and goat in your herd. So suppose cow and buffalo and sheep and goat all are in equal proportion. So even you will be able to draw a pie diagram, but just by observing the pie diagram, you will not be able to make any meaningful conclusion that this animal is having higher number or this animal is having lower number. So in such case, the pie diagram should be avoided where two different categories are having equal size or they are close in size. Now the other one, the fourth one is the area graph. So area graph, it is not that much commonly used, but it is being used in many fields. So what area graph is, the area chart or area graph are used to represent cumulative total. This cumulative frequency we have already studied at the time when I was talking with you about frequency distribution. So this area chart are used to represent the cumulative total using numbers or percentage over time. So this is again a time graph or time chart. Whereas I want to repeat it again that pie diagram is not a time chart, or it is not representing that a particular thing is changing with the time. So here again area graph is representing the cumulative total using number or percentage over time. So in area chart, the value of each series are always stacked relative to the preceding series value. So what we are doing, we are just presenting the chart into the stacked format. Stacked format means first proportion we are taking in the upper side. Firstly, we are representing a particular category in the lower side, and then the next category on the upper side. So this is how we will see just one. We'll see one example, and then it will be very clear to you because it is not commonly being used. That is why it may be difficult to you to appreciate this area graph. So it is very similar to line graph. However, it differs from line plot in that the area below the plotted line is filled with color to indicate the volume. So what in this stack diagram, what we are doing, this is the y-axis, this is the x-axis. Here suppose a particular category, the population of cattle in year 2013. So suppose this is 2013, this is 2014, this is 2015. So we want to show the population of cattle in different year. So what we will do, we will prepare a line diagram up to like this, and this area will be colored. So the color of this area will represent the volume of this particular category, that is cattle category. Suppose buffalo is having different population in this different year. So what we will do, in upper side we will construct a diagram cumulative frequency. That means the frequency of cattle and buffalo will be added together, and this area will represent the volume of buffalo. So just we'll see one example. So what I wanted to see is tell you here, however it differs from line plot in that the area below the plotted line is filled with color to indicate the volume. So area below the plot, this is the plotted line, and area below the plotted line is colored. So this is how the area graph is prepared. Just we'll see one example, then it will be more clear to you. So this is an example of area graph. Here you can see the milk yield of Kankraj and crossbred cow during different years. So here you just observe the different years are 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, and we are having two type of animals, the Kankraj animal and the crossbred animal. Here you can see this is the graph, and from this legend you can see the crossbred is represented by brown color and Kankraj is represented by green color. So here the first crossbred cattle in 2011 it is 3320. So here it has been marked to 3320. Then in 2012 it is 3000, so marked. Then 3260 again, then 3040, then 3870. So likewise we will just make this line and we will color the below given area. So this is how the area diagram is being prepared. Again you just see the population of Kankraj. So Kankraj population is given here 1750. So what we will do in 3320 we will add 1750 and it will reach around 5000. So we will put one point at 5000. Then again 3000 plus 1940 and we will add it, make the point here. Then 3260 plus 2080 and we will make point here. And similarly we will prepare a line and the area below that line will make it with some other color. So we will make it with some other color. So suppose I am making it with the blue color. So this area we can color it with this color. So this is how the area graph is being prepared. Now what we will do, okay, now the next type of graph or diagram is scatter plot or an XY plot. This is also an important type of presentation of data in the form of scatter plot. Actually this is generally prepared when we are determining the correlation or relationship between the two variables. So that we have to study in our later classes, how to determine the correlation or relationship between two variables. So here in a scatter plot or an XY plot, it is used to see if one event affects another event. So that means if we want to see the relationship between the two variables, then we have to use a scatter plot or an XY plot. It determines the relationship, already I have mentioned that it determines the relationship between the two different things. So what we are doing, on x-axis we are representing one variable, on y-axis we are representing another variable. So if both variable increases or decreases at the same time, suppose x is increasing and y is also increasing, or x is decreasing and y is also decreasing, then this is called as positive relationship. This is called as that this diagram, this graph is having positive relationship. And if one variable is decreasing whereas another is increasing, if one is increasing another is decreasing, that means these two are having negative relationship. So this is how the scatter plot diagram is being interpreted. Now we will see one example. This is an example of scatter plot or an XY plot. So here you can see these are the two variables x and y. So what we will do, for each point, for each value, suppose the first value for x is 5.4. So on x-axis we will mark, on x-axis what we will do, we will mark 5.4. On y-axis it is 6.8. So on y-axis we will mark it as 6.8. So similarly these points will be marked, and after seeing the direction of this point, we will not attach this line, but we will see the direction of these points, and if the direction of this point is upward, that means it is having positive relationship. Positive relationship. Or if the direction is downward also, then also that means ki x and y both are moving in same direction, then also it is having positive relationship. But suppose the x axis is moving upward and y axis is moving downward, then it is having negative relationship. So this is the use of line scattered plot or xy plot. Now another very important, the most important I think for us to represent the data in the visual form is histogram, because this histogram is working with the quantitative data. What we have seen in the bar diagram, that bar diagram is working with qualitative data, whereas this histogram we are working with continuous or quantitative variables. So how it is constructed? It is constructed by erecting vertical bars. So similar to bar diagram, if you remember what we are doing here also we are constructing a vertical bars. So these are the vertical bar. This is the vertical bar, and height of each bar corresponding to the number of scores, that is frequency in the interval. So height of this bar, this height will represent the frequency similar to the bar diagram that we have already seen. But the difference is that bar of adjacent class interval, this is the adjacent bar. So bar of adjacent class interval touch each other, leaving no space in between. If you remember the bar diagram class, I might have told there that there is no gap, there is gap between the two bars in case of bar diagram, but in case of histogram there will not be any gap between the two adjacent bars. So this no space, since this is, there is no space, this no space, it represents that the data that you are dealing with is continuous, that is the class interval is continuous. Continuous means if it is 0 to 5, next one will be 6 to or 5 to 10. So this is how this histogram is being prepared. Now what are the components of histogram? I have already told you the simple thing that first of all you should have, first of all the graph should have title that will identify the population for which you are working, for what kind of data you are preparing the histogram. Then vertical axis, that is y axis, it will represent the frequency of that particular class, and then x axis, that is horizontal axis, it identify the class limit or class boundary, that means 0 to 5, or sometimes we are taking the midpoint. So how midpoint is calculated? 0 plus 5 divided by 2, that means 2.5. So what, instead of class interval, what we will take? We will just take the midpoint 2.5, and frequency against 2.5 will be constructed as a bar. Just we will see few examples, then it will be more clearer to you. This histogram is very important for your examination also, and in general also there are many instances where we are constructing the histogram. Then what it is telling, actually histogram is a graph of bars of equal width drawn adjacent to each other. So what it is telling, that histogram is a graph of bar of equal width. Why equal width? Because this equal width represent that it is having equal class interval. When the class interval is not equal, the width will vary. So here you can see that width of the bar is also important. That is why the histogram is two-dimensional diagram, because height, along with height, the width of the bar is also representing something. Here it is representing class interval. That is why the histogram is a two-dimensional diagram or graph. Now, what are the component of histogram? A histogram is said to be two-dimensional. I have told you, because the height and width of the bar depends on the frequency and class interval respectively. And there are different names given to histogram: the frequency histogram, relative frequency histogram, or percentage histogram, depending on what in which form you are utilizing the frequency. Either it is a actual frequency or relative frequency or percentage. Now, how to construct histogram? So first is the class what we will do, will form two axes, x-axis and y-axis. So this horizontal axis will represent the class interval, already I told you. Then vertical axis, that is y-axis, it will represent the frequency. Vertical axis will represent the frequency. The bar in the histogram are drawn adjacent to each other and there is no gap, already we have seen it. Origin of each axis is located at x and y intercept. So this is the origin of this graph. One important convention is that the height of graph is 66 to 75% of its width. There is no hard and fast rule, but this is convention that height should be 66 to 75% of its width. So this is how the histogram is being prepared. The two axes should be labeled appropriately and you should give the caption of the figure. So these are the general things. Now this is an example of histogram. So how this frequency distribution of data on marks of a student in biostatistics. So these are the categories of marks, class of marks: 0 marks, 10 marks, 20 marks, 30, 40. So like that, what we have done against frequency, we have prepared a histogram. So you see 0 to 10 the frequency is 6, then 10 to 20 it is 12. So similarly, like this we constructed a graph from the classified data. You can mark that there is no gap between the adjacent bar. So the histogram will not have any gap between the bars. Now these are the sometime in examination you may be asked what are the different shape that you can observe in histogram. So the histogram, when we are constructing it with the data having normal distribution, then it is called as symmetric histogram. So what is normal distribution, we will see in the later classes. I think it is too early to know about the normal distribution. So just remember that if the data is normal distribution, it will be having symmetric shape. Then the next one is asymmetric shape or skewed. So here you can see the histogram which is skewed to the right, then histogram that is skewed to the left. So this is the skewed shape of histogram. Then this is the bimodal histogram. Bimodal histogram means mode that we will study in later classes when we will study measure of central tendency. So here you can see these are the model points. So this is the bimodal histogram. Then J-shaped histogram. So these are the histogram, different shapes of histogram that will solely depends on the nature of your data. If your data is skewed, your histogram will be skewed. So this is very good measure to see whether your data is normally distributed or not. If you want to know, then just prepare one histogram. You can say that how your data is distributed. Now, the next method of presentation of data in visual form is frequency polygon. So this is constructed from frequency distribution such that the horizontal axis, same that we are seeing now, horizontal axis and vertical axis, So on vertical axis there will be frequency, and on horizontal axis there will be class interval, similar to histogram. But now you will see how it differs. However, the frequency of class is not represented by vertical bar. So the frequency of class is not represented by bar, but it is represented by a dot placed on proper height. Suppose this class interval is 0 to 10. So it is having frequency of 20. So at the height of 20 on y axis, we will see 20 on y axis, and we will put one dot. Similarly, we will put various dots, and at last we will match these dots. So, however, the frequency of class is not represented by vertical bar, but it will be represented by a dot placed on the proper height over the midpoint of the class interval. So here you have to remember this is at the midpoint of this class interval. So this bar will not be there. Now it is used to represent the quantitative data in graphic form. So this is again for quantitative data. Earlier, in case of bar diagram, pie diagram, we have seen that this is used to represent. Bar diagram is exclusively used for representing the qualitative data, but here this histogram, frequency, polygon, etc. are exclusively used for representing the quantitative data. We first mark the dot above the midpoint of each class at a height equal to the frequency, of that class. Same as marking the midpoint at the top of each bar in histogram. This will be same as the histogram, but there will not be any bar. Now what we will do, we will join the adjacent dot with straight line. This is very important. You have to remember straight line. Straight line means you have to use scale and connect those points, not by freehand. You have to use scale and then you have to connect the joints. Just in the next slide we will see the example. So this is the frequency polygon. Here frequency polygon is usually prepared along with histogram, but you can prepare it without histogram also. So what you can see here, at midpoint points are given, and now at the end these points are connected to each other by use of scale. So we will keep on scale and then we will connect these points. Okay, why I am emphasizing on it, because there is one more way of presentation of data, that is frequency curve. There we are not using scale, but we are using free hand. So I think frequency polygon is clear to you. So what we have to do, we have to present class interval on the x-axis and frequency on the y-axis, and at the midpoint of the class at appropriate height we have to place the dot, and at last we have to connect each and every dot with the help of a scale. So this is frequency polygon. Now the next one is frequency curve. So it is very similar to frequency polygon, but only thing is that you have to connect the dots with smooth hand, not with the scale, with the help of scale. It should not be matched in straight line. So here we mark the midpoint at height equal to frequency and then join the adjacent dot with a smooth hand, not in straight line. For a very large data set, suppose you are having very large data set, as the number of classes are increased. So what you will have, if you are having large data set, the number of classes will be very close, it will be increased number of classes, and frequency polygon eventually become a smooth curve. So even if you are preparing frequency polygon by attaching it with straight lines, but since there are infinite number of class interval, this will be similar to your frequency curve. So it will be a smooth curve, and there will not be any difference between frequency curve and frequency polygon. So when you are having very large data set, the appearance of frequency curve and frequency polygon will be one and same. So this is an example of frequency curve. The dots are being attached with the smooth hand. Now, the last important way of presentation of data in visual form is cumulative frequency curve or ogive. So it is generally pronounced as ogive, written as ogive, but pronounced as ogive. So it is actually a line graph. It is actually a line graph of a cumulative frequency. Again, you have to remember the cumulative frequency. So it is a line graph of cumulative frequency. It is also called as cumulative polygon. So these are the name: cumulative frequency curve or cumulative frequency polygon or cumulative polygon. It can be organized as either less than or more than ogive. So there are two types of ogive: less than ogive and more than ogive. So what is the difference that we will see? We can also erect both curve in a single graph by taking both of these cumulative frequency distribution in single graph. So in a same piece of paper, in same graph, you can prepare the less than ogive and more than ogive both. So, or you can prepare it separately also. In either way you can prepare. Okay. So now we will see how it is being prepared. So this is an example. Here you can see the marks of students: 0 to 10 marks 6 students, 10 to 20 marks 12 students, like that 90 to 100 marks 4 students. So what we will do, this is the frequency column. So from this frequency column we will prepare a cumulative frequency. The first one is less than cumulative frequency. So in less than cumulative frequency, what we will write? The 6, the next frequency we will add 6 plus 12 18, then 18 plus 22 40, then 40 plus 22 68, 68 plus 40 is equal to 108, 108 plus 35 143. Likewise, when we will see the last class will be having a frequency equal to sum of all the frequency of all the classes. So this is how we can check whether we have prepared cumulative frequency in correct way or not. Similar to this, more than ogive can be prepared, but for preparation of more than ogive, you have to start it from the bottom. You have to start it from the bottom in similar fashion. So the first is 4, then in next class is 12. So 4 plus 12 16. Then plus 16 32, then plus 25 57, and similarly in the last class you will get the sum of all the frequency, that is 200. So this is how the cumulative frequency, that is less than and more than, can be prepared. Now from this you have to prepare one curve or graph. So this is an example of, this is less than ogive and this is more than ogive. So similar, this is the, on x-axis there is marks and y-axis it is frequency. You have to put the dots of all the cumulative frequency and then you have to match this frequency. So someone can ask whether we have to connect these dots with a smooth hand or scale. So since the name is curve, you can attach the dots with the help of smooth hands. So similarly, this is the less than ogive, and we can prepare both less than and more than ogive in a single diagram. This is an example where this is the less than ogive and this is more than ogive. So these are the various 9 type of visual presentation of data that we have studied in this class. This is extensively used in many fields, and if you want to see example of each category, just see the commentary, cricket commentary on television. You will get, definitely you will get all kind of data, all kind of visual presentation of data, and from there you can learn in a practical way how to present data. Okay, so hopefully it is clear to you. Now, these are the 3 other visual presentation of data. that is not being used regularly, but you should know the name, and if you are interested, you can go and study in detail. These are the stem and leaf diagram, box and whisker plot, and pictogram and cartogram. So this is an example of stem and leaf diagram. I am not going to detail it. You just, if you are interested, you can go and refer some standard book or internet. You will get lot of material. And this is the diagram of box and whisker plot. So I think with this I have done with the visual representation of data. Hopefully you understand and understood all the concept that I was willing to convey you. Thank you.